Let's keep talking about China because China continues to be an escalating issue. Ray Dalio was at a Forbes event last week and he said this about China. The relative position of the United States has declined and the relative situation in China has risen. And he wrote in April that he believes the US and China are, quote, on the brink of war and beyond the ability to talk. Do you agree with him? Do you believe the situation between the United States and China is that dire?
Well, we are in a cold war. The Biden administration is just not saying that, but we are. I mean, if you look at all the criteria of what that, whether it's spy balloons coming over our country, whether it's the spy base in Cuba, whether it's some of the economic warfare, whether it's fentanyl that's being shoved into our country over the southern border that's manufactured in China, add all that up. Stealing. When I was building this software company, tiny startup, into a world-class company. In 1989, on my first business trip in China, I went into a street market, and there, Great Plains software was being sold for $1 a disc at a time when we were selling it for $5,000 a module back in the United States. We weren't even selling internationally, and they were already pirating all of our software. So my entire career, I've watched China steal all that IP. So whether it's spy balloons, stealing our technology, or cyber wars, as a state, we're getting attacked every single day by state-sponsored cyber attacks. North Korea, Russia, Iran, China top the list. They attack assets, they attack our cities, they attack the state, they attack our school districts, they attack our tribal nations. And we've really beefed up in North Dakota our cybersecurity, but the Biden administration isn't providing the support they need, from a defense standpoint. So cyber war, we're in a cold war with China. Yeah, the situation is dire. And then when Secretary Blinken goes to meet with them, and we don't talk about energy policy because the Biden administration policy is basically, let's shut down energy development in America. Let's go all electric. Oh, where are we going to get our batteries? We'll buy them all from China. Well, where's China getting their rare earth minerals? Well, they're getting from their Belt and Road Initiative, where they're tearing up countries like the Congo, where you got to move 500,000 pounds of earth to get enough rare earth minerals to make a battery that we buy to put in an electric car, so someone thinks that they're actually helping the environment. If you care about the environment, you would want to have every ounce of energy created in the United States, because we do it cleaner, safer, smarter than anywhere else in the world. And if you said, hey, EVs are the answer, well, then we're trading OPEC for Sinopec. And then we would have our dependence on the country that is actually one of our greatest adversaries. So again, none of it makes any sense. But I agree, there's a real threat. Japan, we talked about that. 100% of their oil and gas is coming through the South China Sea, and now China's got the biggest navy in the world. So the risks of what's happening, these near misses with airplanes and with the ships in the South China Sea near Taiwan, these are all the provocations that come along with a Cold War. Let's just call it what it is and start addressing it. And we have to get into a position where we negotiate from strength, not weakness.
You're straight up calling it a Cold War. So under a Burgum presidency, how exactly are you navigating this? What would our relationship with China look like? How would you bring them to the table? What does that look like?
Well, it has to start with energy policy. China is the largest importer of oil and gas in the world. Over 10% of the daily consumption around the world, 10 million barrels a day, are imported every day into China. And this is an opportunity where we have the potential to be, we are at the top, near the top, but we have an opportunity as an energy powerhouse to really control that discussion. Our two economies, the number one economy in the world, the US, the number two, China, those two things are interconnected. It's going to be impossible just to shut those two things off. And so we have to figure out, how do we strategically work with each other? And China is, has got to understand, with the hundreds and hundreds of millions of people in China that are still trapped in poverty, they've got a bunch of issues they have to deal with. And we actually have some things where, from an economic standpoint, we're in China's interest to figure out a way to not go to war with the U.S., because we're one of their biggest customers for a number of things, but for us to strategically decouple on things that are of national security, but figure out a way to make sure that they don't have an incentive to want to go to war from us. And part of that is making sure that we're supplying the Philippines, South Korea, Japan, all of those countries that we fought for, and folks like my dad fought for in the World War II, that we're supporting them with with energy and supply chains so that they're not dependent on our adversaries. Again, selling energy to our allies versus buying it from enemies, that is the number one diplomatic and economic thing that we need to do immediately once we're in office.